Hey everyone, welcome back. So today's video is a little bit different. I thought I would be generous and share my story, my background with psychedelics, my background with mental health, and this whole process I've been on with you so that you have a little more context about who I am, kind of my history, my skill set, my knowledge, and so you just kind of have a sense of who it is that you're watching here on the channel. I figured it's about time that I start to share more. And hopefully this will kind of create more relatability, more of a sense of community here, and maybe a little more trust for you in terms of whether or not I'm a good person for you to be listening to or learning from. So let's go ahead and get into it. So just a little meta commentary here off the bat. The very fact that I'm sitting here with a camera in my face, talking to it, posting these on YouTube for the world to see, particularly about my history and my background with psychedelics and all the experiences I've had, is in and of itself, not to be like, too dramatic about it, but is a huge sign of my own personal growth and my own personal healing. So, off the bat, just so you know, I'm a highly introverted person. Like the last time I took a Big Five personality test, I think I scored 86% out of 100 on introversion. Like I'm very introverted. I grew up, an only child. So I'm used to being alone. I've never been great on camera. I've always had an issue with being on camera. I've had, drama about it. And so the fact that I'm sitting here with a camera, talking to it, feeling relatively relaxed, relatively at ease, although it could be better and I could be more relaxed. And also I've been terrified to share about my history of psychedelics publicly. Mostly because I didn't want my family to know, it's kind of a coming out kind of thing. Also, potential employers or, friends that I don't want to know this, or, it's just a very personal thing. And the fact that I'm sharing something so personal with the world at large, and that I feel relatively comfortable doing so, and that, I'm getting more and more comfortable on camera, and that I'm enjoying sharing just points to a massive personal growth piece for me. So just on a meta note, that hopefully that gives you a little context is in terms of who I am and where I'm coming from. I'm a very shy person, very introverted, and as much as I love people, I love socializing, I'm really used to being alone. And I've never been particularly like great on camera or great with public speaking. These are all things I'm learning how to do. I'm really good one-on-one. I'm really good coaching. I've always been that person that people, in a pinch, they come to and they want advice. They want, reflection. They want clarity. And then once I became good with NLP and hypnosis, they would want some change work, right? So that I'm good with. But in terms of like publicly kind of extroverting my thing, that's always been this huge kind of like sticking point. So, here we go. Anyways, my history of psychedelics. Let me go ahead and dive into it here for you and kind of share a bit about this with you. So because I know some of you on the channel here are probably fairly new to psychedelics and exploring them maybe in the last year, couple of years, based on all the kind of, great new science and all the optimistic stuff. You may be thinking I'm new to it also. You might also be thinking I'm younger than I am based on my look, because I have a baby face and kind of like a young kind of way about me. Kind of my behavior, my micro behaviors and expressions and mannerisms are all kind of fairly young, right? So let me just kind of contextualize that. I am in my mid 40s. I'm a Gen X, not a millennial. I'm not, definitely not Gen Z. I started doing psychedelics in the early 90s. So my first psychedelic experience, I want to say, was probably in 1992, to put this in context. I was actually fascinated with psychedelics since probably 8th grade or so. And what first drew me to psychedelics back then, this is before the whole mental health revolution. This is before we had all the current context and kind of, kind of social approval, if you will, for psychedelics at large. They were still very taboo. Still, they'll fry your brain, they'll ruin you. Don't screw yourself up. But like a lot of young people, I kind of got enamored with the whole 60s hippie thing and got enamored with kind of the romance around it and just curious by the weirdness of it. So my friends who were a little bit older had taken psychedelics, would tell me these stories, and I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. Like, I wasn't necessarily prone to a lot of drug use, but I was drawn from a very young age, we could say. And so eventually, that led to me starting to take psychedelics after researching them and nerding out about them. I think it was sophomore, junior year of high school. So like 1992. And at first, yeah, it was very much just about exploration, play, fun, novelty, weirdness, like it is for a lot of people, which is, great, beautiful. And quite frankly, I think the more I've learned over the years, I actually think there's a lot of value that doesn't get acknowledged in novelty. That novelty in play itself is a very healing thing. And there's nothing wrong with, wanting to do psychedelics or some sort of safe but wild experience as a form of play. I think that has its place. And I think it's kind of sad that our culture has kind of poo-pooed that and downplayed that as somehow, less than valid. Anyways, I digress. So I started taking them in high school and kind of exploring and getting into it. My best friend at the time also got into psychedelics around the same time. And we started kind of exploring it just as kind of this mysterious, fascinating, interesting thing. Somewhere along the way, we found some of the work of Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, when they were at Harvard and they were doing their studies and they were doing kind of stuff. And we went through some experiences based on some of the stuff that they created. They created a book called The Psychedelic Experience, which is basically a guided ego death experience that they made back in the 60s. They took the Tibetan Book of the Dead and they rewrote it to be recontextualized so that the death rebirth experience in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which they thought matched the psychedelic experience very well, they tweaked the language a bit so that it more directly addressed the psychedelic experience. And then this is then read to you while you take a high dose, lay down, kind of have an out of body or a deep internal experience, and you have an ego death experience, and then you're reborn. So I had that experience on December 4th, 1993. So a year into my psychedelic experiences, I was already having ego death experiences, transcendent experiences, and this kind of contextualization of spirituality and kind of psychedelic therapy with psychedelics. And this kind of, I didn't realize how much this would be foundational to my life and how much this would set me apart from other people doing psychedelics that I would meet later on in my life. But it gave me a roadmap and a way of working and a skill set and a foundation and a grounding in how to work with the psychedelic state that I use to this very day. And that has been powerful and profound. Side note, I don't really want to use this video for much self-promo, but I'm working on a small downloadable kind of audio for people who are interested in this kind of experience of ego death based on that book. So I've taken some of the core pieces that I think are the deepest teachings, turned them into like a listenable kind of audio, kind of, guided meditation, if you will, that takes you into an ego death, out of your body experience into the oneness of the universe and then guides you back. So if you're interested in that, keep your eyes, on this channel for it. I will be kind of making a video about it and, sharing links, but it's not quite ready yet. So anyways, back to the story. So I had this experience. I was 17. It was the day before my 17th birthday that I had this experience. I had this transformative ego death rebirth experience, and it answered so many of the deepest questions about myself, about life, things that I didn't even know I was carrying in my heart or wondering. It answered. And it was profound. It was transformative. It's easily one of the most transformative experiences of my life to date. So that kind of set a foundation and a tone for psychedelic exploration going forward. From there, I'm also a musician. So of course I got into the psychedelic music scene. Early on that was, jam bands, Fish, the Grateful Dead, that kind of a thing. That included, following Fish on tour and all that, like going hardcore as a jam band, kind of hippie dude. But also that included a little bit later on, getting into the rave scene and dance culture and raving, and which is was back then a very psychedelic scene. So I was also involved in these communities around psychedelics as well. So I started to find kindred spirits, other people who are also interested in this topic and exploring it, going deep with it. Of course, that branched out into other psychedelics like MDMA, DMT, things like this, right? So I, while I was doing this and while I was exploring it, part of like what really kept me compelled with psychedelics, especially after that ego death experience from the psychedelic experience, is that I'm saying experience a lot, by the way. Part of what was compelling for me is that I started to have these breakthrough experiences. Again, you can probably relate to this, of resource states, of union with God, of, touching into the most pure part of myself, of pure, profound love for all of life, or this moment of absolute clarity and wisdom where there was no projecting or like egoic layer that I was putting on things, and I was just seeing and being with and being present, were these experiences of just pure joy moving through me with no shame or no guilt or no fear around feeling joy. A lot of us carry, repress our joy and carry shame and guilt around it because as children we're taught, not to be loud or not to be exuberant in the wrong moments. So that can, become a message later on in life that don't feel joy. So a lot of adults kind of suppress it. So I would have these experiences of breaking through in a profound joy or laughter or, freeing myself up, discovering, new abilities, giving myself like huge room to be like wild on my instrument or learning how to dance or, right. I'd have these big breakthrough experiences. And then I would come back down and I would find that I, would be back with the same problems that I had before. And what I didn't realize was happening was that I had CPTSD from early childhood events that I didn't even know I had. And I didn't know, there was no language for them in the 90s and the early 2000s about CPTSD, at least not that was available to me or that I had encountered. I'm sure maybe in some small circles, if you're like a hardcore therapy head, maybe you knew about this, but it wasn't a widespread kind of social thing to talk about at that time. Trauma and owning, that trauma could be subtle, it could be repeated, and wouldn't necessarily have to be, the dramatic single event CPTSD that like we more classically think about. Yeah, I didn't know. And yet I was experiencing CPTSD. I was experiencing the symptoms of it, the dissociation of it, the kind of emotional flashbacks of it, the depression, the anxiety. I would loop through these issues that would cause me to dissociate. And I actually had a problem knowing what I wanted to do with my life, knowing what I wanted to do with my time, where I wanted to go. And part of why I was doing psychedelics was to explore myself and explore what I found fascinating in life. Because there were a lot of things that didn't hold meaning for me in life, but psychedelics did. And they pointed me towards other things that did, right? Music, for example, spirituality, for example, meditation, healing, these kinds of things started to emerge as things I was fascinated with, right? So, but I didn't know how to plug that in and turn that into a career. So I had this issue. I had this ongoing dilemma of feeling stressed about what am I going to do with my life and how am I going to have a career? How am I going to make money? What am I going to do with myself? How can I make something of myself that would then create anxiety, then create depression, right? And as I would get anxious and depressed, my way of responding, the way I was wired up from childhood, is that I would dissociate. So I would freeze, I would get overwhelmed, I would get spaced out. And then the way I was taught to deal with dissociation and overwhelm from my upbringing, I don't think it was intentional. There's no blame in my heart about it. But the messages I got was to distract myself and go indulge in something, pleasurable. So anytime I get triggered, which was a lot of the time, I would then dissociate, and then I would end up, eating junk food and watching TV, or spending hours on the internet, or, going for long hikes and just thinking about nothing, or, doing anything but the productive things that I cared about. So I had this issue around doing, following my passion, living my dream. And then I had this issue around, if when I felt I couldn't or felt afraid to, that would create dissociation in me. That would put me in this loop of being unproductive, essentially. So that would make the problem worse, right? So then I would have more anxiety because I would recognize that I was wasting my time not doing the things I could be doing that would give me the skills to help me kind of live my life and succeed. What I couldn't admit to myself at that time was that I was passionate about psychedelics and interested in a career in psychedelics, but didn't know how to get into it. So the fact that I'm talking to you on camera about this is the full circle and proof of my healing, that I've stepped up to the plate and am now working in psychedelics, against, all of the kind of issues and fears and taboos I personally carried around it. So it took me a lot of courage to admit that this is my passion, my interest. It took me a lot of courage to be public about it. And yet I've decided to do it. So anyway, so I was struggling all through, my 20s and even my 30s with knowing, that I would have these breakthrough experiences. I would have these ego death experiences, transcendent experiences. I would have this sense of, that this is, who I am. I'm this, I have all these qualities and all these capabilities, and I would become very self-aware of my strengths. And then I'd be terrified to put that into action, or I get triggered and I dissociate and I couldn't be in action. And it just kind of rinsed and repeated for years and years and years. And I didn't know how to get help. And I was too poor to get help from a therapist. So I didn't have the resources, even though I had family members who had the money, they wouldn't help me. That's a whole other story. And so I was too poor to get the help myself. So I had to figure it out for myself. So somewhere along the way, it became pretty self-evident, like I've said in other videos, like I said in the last video, and maybe I'll, put a link for it above here, that in my community of friends, of dancers, of artists, of musicians, of healing artists, a lot of these people, most of these people were doing psychedelics, and most of them still had mental health issues, whether it was some sort of OCD, whether it was some sort of anxiety or depression, social anxiety, procrastination issues, self-judgment issues, all this kinds of stuff. I started to recognize all my friends take psychedelics, they all have breakthrough experiences, and they're still having issues. And I'm having breakthrough experiences, and I've had, some pinnacle consciousness experiences, and I still have issues. So obviously, whatever healing potential is here with psychedelics isn't getting me there. It's not the right avenue of investigation. As much as I love it, it's not the right avenue of investigation to help me fix my life, which is what I needed at the time. So, there was a lot of depression and a lot of guilt and a lot of shame and a lot of regret and self-judgment that came with burning years and decades this way and not having an answer. And also the thing that I love the most is this thing that's kind of socially taboo and illegal and hard to talk about, and not really knowing how to proceed with making a career out of it. And also just feeling like I need to learn how to make money and be stable and be an adult. And I don't know how, right? And I'm like in my 30s and I'm like, it's time to sort this shit out, right? So I, through a series of events, got into personal development at that time. So it started with like doing Landmark, and then, got into like Tony Robbins' work, which is, a huge entry point for a lot of people. And, Tony is trained in NLP. And, I was kind of peripherally kind of also interested in the PUA thing at the time, because I want to be better at dating and better with women. So, and a lot of the early PUA stuff, particularly Mystery and Ross Jeffries, like, which whatever, is also based in NLP. So I started to get these little pieces of NLP from these various sources. And I found that was very, very interesting, and kind of the promise in NLP is that we can rapidly transform, right? And so the more you start to explore it, you hear these stories of people who are just having huge breakthrough experiences that from a therapist perspective seem impossible. Like when, if you've ever watched the Tony Robbins thing, I think it's on Netflix, or, watch any videos of him on YouTube, and you see him do an intervention with someone, at one of these conventions, and he helps them clear an issue in a 5 or 10 minute conversation. That's insane. From a therapy standard, like where normally therapy takes years for people to clear stuff, being able to clear something in 10 minutes or even shit, let's say an hour, or shit, let's say 4 hours, that's wild. That's absolutely bonkers. So I became curious. I became fascinated because I was already fascinated with how we work. I should add that I kind of didn't say, since early on, since, back in the day when I first discovered, Ram Dass and Timothy Leary's work, that of course led me to be here now. That of course led me to studying Eastern spirituality, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, and various mystical things. I'm not sure if I said that yet, but so I had this, and also astrology as well. So I had kind of these roadmaps and these kind of models of understanding that were based in spirituality, but were kind of, proto-psychological tools, right? But I didn't have like any modern kind of clear, effective, really sharp tools. A lot of these would help me have breakthrough states, but then I'd end up back at the same place. So my observation about spirituality and spiritual practice is the same thing that you see with psychedelics. You see a lot of these people who have breakthrough states, breakthrough experiences, but it doesn't change their mental health. They finish the practice, they go back to their day-to-day life, and they still struggle with anxiety, they still struggle with depression, they still struggle with, sense of purpose, or, self-love, or whatever it is, right? So in my experience, sadly, I think there's a huge case to be made for spirituality and for psychedelics, and I'm all about both. But my experience is that they don't connect cleanly and consistently to mental health, and there's a reason for that I'll be explaining more on this channel, and I'll be talking about. This is actually one of the major pieces I want to talk about on the channel, is when it doesn't work, which for a lot of people, I would dare say most, why don't psychedelics work long-term in and of themselves? Why is it that people can be deeply spiritual and still be, kind of crappy people with bad, unhealthy relational patterns and unhealthy, mental patterns, and, just still be kind of narcissistic or arrogant or rude or self-centered? Questions like this are really what I want to talk about on the channel, and what I really want to address, because there's this bigger picture here of how do we take these big, profound experiences we have and plug them into our lives so that we actually transform. And this is what I'm really passionate about. And this is the question that slowly bubbled up through the years of my use of psychedelics. How do we transform? Like, it's all good that, like, I had an ego death experience and became one with God, and, touched the infinite love of the universe and felt it in my heart so much that I cried tears for hours. Like, that's awesome. How does that change my life? How does that change the way I relate to people? How does that change, the way I relate to myself? How does that change the way I, view, having a family, or, healing, my issues, or, getting a job, or building a career, or, the shit that people struggle with in the day to day? How do we bridge these worlds? That to me is what my work is really about. And so anyways, so I got into NLP. I got fascinated about the mind. I got fascinated about psychology. And I think I have kind of it's a natural skill set of mine. It's a natural kind of tendency and orientation in me, because I know a lot of people who have also gone deep with psychedelics who don't go that direction. So it's just the way I went. And I got into NLP and I started studying it. And because I didn't have a lot of money, because I was procrastinating and I wasn't working a lot, and I was trying to work through my shit on my own, and I didn't have a therapist, and I couldn't afford a therapist, I was basically poor through my 20s and most of my 30s. And I couldn't afford it. So I self-studied NLP and, kind of went that route with it. And so I would gain knowledge, and I would practice with friends. I would practice with people, volunteers, people who wanted some piece of change to start to get the skill. And I would learn, I'm very interested in like different systems of psychology. So I would learn one school of NLP and one approach, and it would be awesome, but it wouldn't be where I felt like I had the full thing yet. So then I'd learn another, and also I'm just curious. I'm kind of voracious about this kind of knowledge. So then I'd learn another and another and another. And I learned all these various kind of forms and facets and approaches to neurolinguistic programming. And if you guys want to know about NLP, I can do a whole other video about it. It's an interesting topic in and of itself, but I don't want to bore you with technicalities in this video. So So I learned a bunch of NLP and studied for a long, long time. And then I started coaching with NLP. And I started to get like amazing, mind-boggling results. I've seen people from just a couple sessions radically transform their lives. I know people who make millions of dollars a year who were struggling being leaders and in a position like that, who now are like making even more money and more in alignment with it from the work we did together. It's amazing just what NLP does. But I found that sometimes the NLP wouldn't work and it wouldn't like make the change at the deepest level. It didn't answer all the problems I had. It didn't help me understand everything I needed to know. And so slowly, as I've been sifting through NLP, that led me more to hypnosis. So for those of you that aren't familiar with either, there's a huge overlap between NLP and hypnosis. They're very much interconnected kind of fields. Like NLP grew out of study of hypnosis, and hypnosis, like most of the modern hypnosis practitioners, also studied NLP too, so that you have basically skills of taking people down and internally into a trance state, but also you have skills just conversationally with people to help them change kind of what we would call uptime. So with full attention, full awareness, I can help you still shift unconscious stuff through NLP. So I started studying that and started studying hypnotherapy, and I found that not only was I having profound healings and profound breakthroughs, but also at the same time, this was teaching me so much about how the mind works and about, why there are these gaps in spiritual traditions or psychedelic traditions where people can have these really high, far out, amazing cosmic healing experiences, but still not change its people all that much. And it really gave me the answer. It gave me what I was looking for. Took a long time to find it, even studying in NLP and hypnosis, because there are entire different schools of thought within it, and they're not all the same, and they don't all highlight the same techniques and ideas and approaches. And there's particular ideas and approaches that I ended up finding that were like the key that unlocked this for me. So anyways, I've been nerding out on this whole time and slowly building up skill with coaching, right? And I was trying to figure out what I want to coach and how I want to develop this out, who I want to serve. And for me, as I've been self-reflecting over that, along the way, I discovered that I had CPTSD. So I'd been dealing with it this kind of like messy way this whole time. And then, like I said in the last video, I discovered in 2016 that I've had CPTSD. And I discovered, as I started to understand more what anxiety was and what social anxiety was and what general anxiety was, I started to realize that these were pieces of things I'd been carrying for a long time, and depression as well. And I'd realized that I had these huge solutions that I'd moved through from all this psychedelic experience, right? I had these huge resource states of experiencing the love of the universe. I mean, it doesn't get any more big and profound than that, right? But if you can't, again, weave that into your life, if it's just a memory that fades into the distance, it's not really that useful. It's not really that good for us. So I started to realize that I had CPTSD, and I started to realize that, even as powerful as the coaching knowledge that I was, and I was helping people with various areas. A lot of it was anxiety based and stage fright based and, leadership and performance based. That really where my heart really lies is in this conversation of how do we bridge the worlds of the psychedelic experience or these big resource states, spiritual experience, and also, our day-to-day lives for lasting, real, practical transformation and change. This is my jam. This is my shit. This is what I'm here to do. This is what I'm all about. This is what I love. This is what like juices me up when I think about it. It's because if you've ever had a glimpse of your own potential, if you've ever taken a psychedelic and realized how much more you're capable of, maybe you were firing on all cylinders for a little while and it was fucking, you were on, you're amazing, you're hilarious, you're funny, you're witty, you're sharp, you're peaceful, you're strong, you're elegant, you're graceful, you're more skilled with your body and doing things that you normally can't even do, whatever it is. I've seen all of this happen not only for myself, but for a lot of friends. That to me is worth leaning into. connecting the dots between those states and those moments and like the kind of suffering that most people live with just makes sense. It's like when you know that you have resource states and problems, and that when you connect the resources to the problems, that the problems transform, it just seems absolutely silly to not do that. It seems absurd for me to know this and be in this position and not serve and not help people and not teach about it and not talk about it and not lean into it. I would feel like I was being dishonest at the deepest level. So once I found the courage to be public about, my mental health struggles, to be public about this whole journey I've been on of studying psychedelics and spirituality and, self-help and personal development and, all the different levels and layers and learnings I've had inside that. Once I, found the courage to be public, most of all about my psychedelic use and how it's changed my life for the better, but also the kind of gaps in it where it needs improving. It just all started to make sense. And so that's basically been my journey up to this point. And so I've been gifted with all these experiences. I've been gifted with this struggle, and what you find a lot with coaches and healers and teachers is that generally speaking, they've gone through some sort of a problem, some sort of a struggle, some sort of an issue that gives them the foundation to be able to relate to others in a really deep, understanding way that helps them to be able to help others. So the way I currently look at my mental health struggles that I've dealt with and that I still deal with, let me be transparent. I'm not like Superman yet. I'm not perfectly healed in every way. I still have moments of anxiety. I still have moments of depression. I still have moments of self-criticism, but I know what to do when I'm in those spaces. And they have transformed radically. So, I'll probably make another video about it, but just off the top of my head, in the last year, for example, I've massively healed my money issues. I've massively healed my social anxiety issues. I've massively healed my self-love issues. I've massively healed, let me see what else. There's a bunch of stuff I've been working on. Just feeling comfortable being public, and also feeling comfortable being a leader. Like all of this, again, I'm an introvert. I'm a shy, person who, left to my own devices will just kind of hide out by myself and do my own thing. That I'm here on a camera talking to you saying, hey, let's do this, is a sign of how much I've released. And so, anyways, that's where I'm at now. And so moving forward, continuing to work on my own stuff, obviously, I want to start to share this journey with you guys and invite you to do this work as well. What I found is that there's a huge difference between knowing your own psychology and having transformation and change. That there's a huge difference between having a huge spiritual breakthrough and becoming that person every day and bringing that energy into your life. That there's a huge, huge difference between, what seems like fantasy and the lived experience of leveling up as a spiritual being, as an emotional being, as a cognitive being, and just as a moral, human being, right? Really growing into becoming a better person, right? And I know as a coach that I'm just shooting in my living room here. My editing isn't great. I have funny mannerisms and quirks about how I present myself. I ramble on. I know all of this about myself, and it's not the polished, pretty, huge promise that a lot of coaches promise. That, quite frankly, in my experience, has been bullshit. There are a lot of coaches who promise you, and then you go to do the work. You take the course, right? You engage the work, and it doesn't get you that far. It tells you a lot of things, so you're connected to a lot of knowledge, but you're not connected to a lot of tools to change, right? And also, they make it very complex. Or they don't know, or they do it the hard way, and this is the other thing. One of the things I've learned from studying hypnosis and NLP and having these psychedelic experiences is that real transformation, real change usually comes from the bottom up, from the nervous system up into the conscious mind. You have a breakthrough that feels like something shifts, and then you're understanding what shifted after the fact. What a lot of these coaches teach you is top down, where you're trying to use your rational conscious mind to change the rest of your fucking nervous system, which is 90% of it or more, 95% of it. Maybe you're using 5% to try to control 95, and it's hard and it's awkward and it's a lot of work and it doesn't always work that well. So because I'm a really honest person, I'm a really sincere person, and I'm a really humble person, and sounds weird, my heart comes from a place of humility. Let's put it that way, where I haven't been in a place where I want to brag, where I want to just blow up my ego and like make some big polished thing. And like, I'm just not really in alignment with that. I want to give you something real. I want to give you something practical. I want to be real with you. I want to be human with you. You know, my teachers who are fucking amazing at the work that they do, who are game changers in their fields. They're really like, if you get close to them and interact with them, they're very human. They're very like, they're not, pie in the sky. They're not making these huge, crazy promises. They're not blowing you up with, motivation and inspiration and these big, no, they're teaching you how to fucking change your life instead. And so in that vein, in that tradition of grounded awakening, of grounded real change, of grounded real personal transformation that isn't some bullshitty, cult of personality kind of thing. I don't want it to be that. But I do want to offer you these tools. And so that's my journey so far. That's who I am. That's who I've been. That's the arc I've been on. It's been about self-healing all the way since the 90s. It's been about resolving CPTSD and anxiety and depression all the way back. But it's also about weaving in these peak states. I really believe there are kind of two levels to personal development. One is about, healing and fixing the problems. And then the higher level is about, once you've glimpsed the possibility of who you can be, developing into that, right? And I want to do both with you guys. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I realize this is a long video. If you watched the whole thing, thank you so much for listening and caring and being curious and being interested in. Hope you learned a couple things about me along the way and who I am. This is my field of passion. This is my field of interest. This is my field of fascination. I'm constantly self-educating. I'm also constantly getting, taught and mentored at this point, getting guidance from all kinds of teachers, pursuing coaching myself, and my skills get sharper and sharper. And I've seen clients have some serious breakthroughs with this work. So I'm super excited to be able to share all of this with you. And I really think there is a revolution happening in the psychedelic industry. And I really think that what I've got here in this little pocket of it, this little corner of it, is very unique, because nobody's using this kind of approach of, coherence therapy. There are definitely people using IFS. There's not that many people using NLP. I know maybe 4 or 5 NLP and hypnotherapist types in the psychedelic space. So I'm one of very few. And I think these are the tools. I think these are the tools that you can use in your day-to-day life, like whether or not you're high, or when you're microdosing, like I said, or, using these kind of big peak states, and then, doing the integration afterwork with these tools to really accelerate your personal growth path or your personal healing path, wherever you are in this journey. So that's who I am. That's what I'm about. And truly, honestly, thank you so much for listening. From my heart of hearts, this has been an effort of love every step of the way, because I realized early on that it's all one. This is all one being. We're all interconnected. We're all a part of each other. And that at the root of all of life is love, right? That one of the highest frequencies in the universe, one of the truest truths in the universe, is this truth of love and divine love. And I made a commitment to it, to live into that, to lean into that, to serve it as best I could. And I had to self-heal massively along the way. So that's my story. Hopefully that's inspiring for you, or hopefully that's clarifying for you. And if you've watched all of this, all 38 minutes of it, 40 minutes of it, thank you so much. And big love. Okay, more videos to come. I have more content on the way, but just want to share, and I wish you guys all the best. Thanks for watching.